Thank you for watching QTV. We take a look at stories making headlines in our news. Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo have signed an MOU for the export of 600,000 metric tons of maize and mealie meal to that country. Finance Minister Wale Ngandu says government is in the process of finding an equity partner to operate Nitrogen Chemicals of Zambia. And government has disputed reports suggesting that 5 people have died of starvation in Shangombo district in Western Province as a result of the hunger in the area. Now details in our news. Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo have signed a memorandum of understanding that will facilitate the export of 600,000 metric tons of maize and mealie meal to that country. Other products the DRC has requested include wheat, flour, rice, cassava, sugar, beans, tilapia, chicken, Irish potatoes, cooking oil, cement, lime, and iron sheets. Speaking during the signing of the MOU, Agriculture Minister Michael Katambo says the program will commence in the 2020-2021 farming season. Mr. Katambo says the aim of the MOU is to ensure a well-structured trade regime between the two countries in maize and other commodities and create opportunities for Zambia to expand its market for maize and mealie meal, earn foreign exchange and capture statistics for planning. Details in this report.
Zambia has cut a deal with Democratic Republic of Congo to supply over 600,000 metric tons of maize. The Democratic Republic of Congo is Zambia's biggest maize export market. With an estimated population of 68 million people, it provides the largest consumer market for Zambian goods owing to its proximity, which reduces transportation costs. Speaking during the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding, Agriculture Minister Michael Katambo says the program will commence in the 2020 to 2021 farming season.
Riding on this Memorandum of Understanding, the Zambian government is targeting to commence export of maize to DRC, as alluded to by my Permanent Secretary, in 2020. He emphasized that the exports under this Memorandum of Understanding will commence in 2020 as Zambia is coming from the bad season and currently does not have sufficient stocks to accommodate exports. Through the facilitation of the Ministry of Agriculture and the collaboration with the private sector, we are targeting to produce not less than 3 million metric tons of maize in the 2019-2020 season.
Speaking at the same event, Commerce, Trade and Industry Minister Christopher Yeluma, who signed on behalf of Zambia, says his ministry, together with the Ministries of Agriculture and Foreign Affairs, will work together towards actualizing the MOU.
It is my sincere hope that the signing of the MOU will enhance bilateral trade relations between our two countries and ultimately create opportunities for expanded economic growth and development for the benefit of our people. And I trust, ladies and gentlemen, that in future we shall extend this effort to include other products not covered by this MOU.
Luciane Busa is Congolese Minister of Commerce.
This MOU will help us to face the different crises.
Du maïs, on a la certitude qu'il y a un pays frère qui est disposé à pouvoir vendre son maïs à la République démocratique du Congo.
Particularly on the maize, since we know that there is a sister country that is available to sell maize to the DRC.
Indeed, there is an urgent need to scale up life-saving relief efforts as well as to invest in long-term efforts to address the root causes of rising needs in the region. Without these, developmental gains made over the past years in Southern Africa may be quickly eroded, requiring even more costly humanitarian response in the years to come. Favorite Kalando, QTV News in Lusaka.
Finance Minister Wale Ngandu says government is in the process of finding an equity partner to operate Nitrogen Chemicals of Zambia in Kafue district. Dr. Ngandu has told Parliament that this is being done through the Industrial Development Corporation, IDC. He says several interested parties are conducting due diligence of the fertilizer manufacturing plant. The Finance Minister was responding to a question by Kafue Member of Parliament Miriam Chonya, who wanted to know whether any money from the Eurobonds was used to recapitalize Nitrogen Chemicals of Zambia, and if so, how much and when was the money dispersed. Ms. Chonya further asked the minister whether government has any plans to recapitalize NCZ and when the recapitalization plans would be implemented.
Nitrogen Chemicals of Zambia did not receive any capitalization funds, and the government, through the Industrial Development Corporation, has plans to recapitalize the company through the introduction of a strategic equity partner who is expected to take up a stake in the Nitrogen Chemicals of Zambia. Mr. Speaker, this August House wished to note that the government, through the IDC, has received a number of expressions of interest in National Nitrogen Chemicals of Zambia and is currently pursuing them for actualization. The prospective partners have since been undertaking due diligence exercises in the company with a view to make the decision to invest in the company. Therefore, subject to the outcomes of these due diligence exercises, the IDC is confident that this could culminate into a concrete proposal and discussions with potential partners in the second quarter of 2020 and result in successful partnership with respect to the revamping of the company and its recapitalization.
Speaker of the National Assembly Patrick Matibini has directed Energy Minister Matthew Ngua to next week give a ministerial statement to explain why some health institutions in the country are still experiencing load shedding despite the presidential directive to stop load shedding these facilities. The Speaker's directive follows a point of order raised by Monze Member of Parliament Jack Mwimbu, who wanted to know whether the minister was in order not to inform the nation if he is having challenges in implementing the presidential directive, considering that lives of patients are at risk.
Mr. Speaker, I'm aware that Monze, Mazabuka, Kaoma, where I've just been, Gwembe, and a number of health facilities are facing this problem. And as a result of lacking power, Mr. Speaker, even water in the health facilities is not available. And it's affecting the management of patients in the hospitals. Mr. Speaker, if the Minister of Energy had problems pertaining to the directive given by the President over this matter on the floor of this House, the best he should have done was to come back to this House and explain the difficulties he's encountered. That is a noble way and prudent way of managing national affairs. Mr. Speaker, is it in order, Mr. Speaker, to keep quiet after having listened to the President giving that directive and him applauding the same, and he came on the floor of this House to assure that he's going to ensure that health facilities are not load-shedded? But what is obtaining on the ground is different.
Next week, come through with a ministerial statement, update the nation, and also to provide opportunities to members in the House to engage.
Government has refuted reports suggesting that 5 people have so far died of starvation in Shangombo district as a result of severe hunger in the area. Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit DMMU National Coordinator Chanda Kabwe says his office is not aware of any deaths arising from starvation anywhere in the country. Mr. Kabwe says the DMMU has however taken interest in the supposed deaths and will dispatch a team of directors to establish the causes of the said deaths. He has told QTV News that by the permission of the bereaved families, the DMMU wants to see the death certificates to confirm that indeed the deaths were caused by hunger. And Mr. Kabwe has refuted the insinuation by Shangombo Member of Parliament Mobika Mobika that the distribution of relief food in the district is being conducted on partisan lines.
In our distribution, we are using non-governmental organizations, faith-based organizations, and I don't think so. These are neutral institutions. They change, they don't look at the faces when they are distributing to people in need. So it's something that we are going to look at when we go to the district. But me who signs the contracts or clears the contracts for people to be engaged as implementing partners, we've never given a contract to a political organ. We have given contracts to non-governmental organizations. We've given contracts to faith-based organizations, which are the churches, and these are organizations that are helping us. And in the most cases, the organizations that are helping us are international organizations, such as Red Cross, World Vision. We also have the local organizations, such as Caritas Zambia. The church are part of this process. And the NGO that is distributing in Shangombo is not a political organ.
Jesuit Center for Theological Reflection, JCTR, has questioned where government will get the 2.3 billion kwacha allocated in the 2020 national budget for dismantling domestic arrears. JCTR policy analyst Innocent Ndashe has told QTV News that this will be a challenge for government, especially that it is targeting to increase domestic revenue mobilization. Mr. Ndashe notes that the finance minister acknowledged in his budget speech that the country will record a reduction in the mining sector, wondering where the money will come from to offset the arrears owed to local suppliers. He states that as long as load shedding continues, it will be difficult for government to offset these arrears because there will be nowhere to look for the funds to actualize its plans. Mr. Ndashe is also concerned that with the effects of climate change, the agriculture sector will contribute too little to the growth of the economy. Mr. Ndashe, however, states that government's decision to deal with arrears owed to local suppliers is a welcome move, noting that if the money is made available, it has great potential to spur economic development.
In an instance that the economy will not grow, I think it will be very difficult for government to actually offset the debt that they owe to the local suppliers. So it really calls for, I think, government moving forward. What we also see missing is that they haven't really touched on the informal sector. They can explore on how the tax base can be broadened to capture, for example, the informal sector that are capable of paying taxes that are in the range of and have capacity, but they are not captured. So meaning government might want to form measures such as doing a lot of sensitization for people to formalize their businesses, so that once these are captured, then the tax base would be expanded. But at the rate that we're actually moving and the challenges that the economy is facing, it's very difficult to predict that even the increased domestic revenue that government is targeting will actually be made. So I think government needs to think through and see how best the tax base can be broadened.
Citizens Environmental and Social Concern CESCO Executive Director Cornwall Hakapia has commended government for increasing carbon tax by 20% in the 2020 national budget for all vehicles entering Zambia. And Mr. Hakapia has urged government to make sure that the money realized from this tax is prudently used to mitigate climate change and not diverted to other expenses and projects unrelated to climate change. He has told QTV News that the decision to zero-rate the supply of gas appliances is a very good move, but will have very little impact as long as liquefied petroleum gas remains expensive. Mr. Hakapia says it will be very difficult for people to switch from being dependent on charcoal, which is very cheap and easy to access, to the expensive and scarce liquefied petroleum gas. He states that only when both the gas appliances and the liquefied petroleum gas are zero-rated or subsidized will Zambia see a massive change, which will subsequently result in reduced deforestation. The United Nations has given Zambia a $2 million United States grant under the Trust Fund for Human Security to support the Sustainable Resettlement Program. UN Resident Coordinator Kumba Gadio says the grant is meant to support the program over a period of 3 years, effective 1st April 2019. Dr. Gadio says the overall goal is to ensure that refugee communities living in Maera and Mayukwayukwa are cohesive, productive, sustainable, and fully integrated into development. Speaking during the handover ceremony of the grant in Lusaka, Dr. Gadio adds that this is also in order that the Sustainable Resettlement Program in Zambia applies fundamental principles of the human security approach.
It is recognized that 3 strands of growth are necessary to reach this goal. First, these communities need to be integrated into the national planning processes at national, provincial, and district levels so that their needs can be identified and prioritized through a consultative basis. We strongly believe that such an approach is essential to grow a cohesive and sustainable new community. Second, the communities in and around the sustainable resettlement schemes need to have access to available social services and economic opportunities, which is fully in line with the targets of the 7th National Development Plan. Third, we need these communities to be wholly integrated with the surrounding society, which is an important ingredient to promote peace and harmony, including social cohesion, and for the
Speaking at the same event, Charge d'Affaires at the Japanese Embassy in Osaka, Toshio Suajura, assured Zambia of his country's continued support in implementing the Sustainable Resettlement Program. And receiving the grant check on behalf of government, Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Vice President, Stefan Mwansa, has assured the UN and the Japanese government that the Zambian government will ensure that the grant is used for intended purposes.
And $800,000 to United Nations Trust Fund for Human Security for its project of promoting human security through sustainable resettlement in Zambia, which will be implemented by UNDP and UNHCR for the first year of the project. In order to further contribute to the Sustainable Resettlement Program, in addition to the contributions to UN agencies, which I have mentioned, Japan has, through JICA, assigned a local integration advisor to the Office of Vice President, dispatched a JOCB to primary and secondary school in Meheba.
The government will take the assistance given and utilize it seriously. Utilize in the sense that we work together. We don't necessarily have to be the ones to get the financial resources and all that, but we work together, decisions are made, we consult one another, and where there's a problem, we come up with a common solution to those problems. We're very grateful for that.
The Zambia Congress of Trade Unions, ZCTU, says the 106 billion kwacha proposed 2020 national budget has missed prioritizing some critical areas of the economy and is, to a large extent, not well aligned with the prevailing economic conditions. Addressing a media briefing on the budget, ZCTU Secretary General Cosmas Mukuka notes with concern that social sectors have seen a reduction in budgetary allocations. Mr. Mukuka further notes that the projected economic growth GDP of 3% is not inspiring to move Zambia towards attaining the goal of becoming a middle-income country by 2030, stating that the budget allocations tend to backslide instead of increasing in the face of the rising cost of living.
Government is not delegating on the infrastructure projects and therefore not slowing down on debt contraction despite the big writing on the walls. 3, it is not clear whether the government is still committed to undertaking the required austerity measures, and if so, what these measures will be in 2020 and what savings will be realized. It can also be concluded from the fiscal position that there will be no money in the 2020 budget for the government to make any meaningful budget choices. As such, there's really nothing to look up to in the national budget, especially the workers, if they were to wear glasses like this.
Mr. Mukuka, however, says the ZCTU commends government for maintaining value-added tax VAT, but hopes that the proposed administrative measures to strengthen enforcement and efficiency of the tax be effective.
The government's decision to maintain taxes, including the value-added tax, is a welcome move. However, Congress only hopes that the proposed introduction of administrative measures to strengthen enforcement and efficiency will be effective. Secondly,
regarding taxes associated with procurement of oil, ZCTU proposes the need for bilateral agreements with oil-producing countries. Another one, the zero rate exercise duty on oil procurement. Tax thresholds. The ZCTU is saddened that the income tax threshold remains unchanged, considering that there was a very minimal increment on the 4% during the collective bargaining for the public service workers, and other sectors in the private sector didn't, especially quasi-government institutions, the increment was quite minimal.
Civil Society Scaling Up Nutrition Alliance CSO Sun has expressed concern that there is no mention of nutrition in the 2020 national budget on how government intends to specifically deal with malnutrition. Appearing before the Parliamentary Budget and Estimates Committee, the Alliance says this raises concern on prioritization by government, given that the stunting levels in the country are still high at 35%. Making submissions before the committee, Alliance member Mwandwe Chileshe says nutrition has only been created for in the 1.1 billion kwacha allocated to the Farmer Input Support Program, e-voucher program, which she says is not enough to address the malnutrition challenges. And HIVOS Southern Africa Manager Sustainable Diets, William Chilufya, says in order to ensure that more money is allocated to nutrition, the Food and Nutrition Bill should ensure that the Food Nutrition Commission is placed in the office of the Vice President and not the Ministry of Health. Mr. Chilufya notes that nutrition covers a lot of sectors, and leaving it in the Ministry of Health limits access to funding, especially from government. And Alliance Country Director Matthew Muhuru has noted with concern that the 2020 national budget is not responsive to the findings of the Vulnerability and Needs Assessment Report done by the Disaster Management and Mitigation Unit.
If you look at nutrition-sensitive and nutrition-specific programs, starting from the Ministry of Health and other sectors, including the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Agriculture, water and sanitation, and other areas, it is actually sad that the budget has drastically reduced. And the budget does not really seem to speak to the Vulnerability and Needs Assessment Report that was conducted by the Disaster Management Unit. This will make it very hard for Zambians in the 2020 year, because I think a number of things that have been identified that are key, that needs to be addressed by the budget, are not really reflected in the budget. We are calling on the government to really relook at how they can find some money and allocate monies that will deal with issues to do with food and nutrition security. Looking at the homegrown school feeding, for example, we've noticed with concern that the budget has actually gone down when there was a recommendation from the Disaster Management Unit to say such programs have to see some sort of increase when it comes to funding, so that they can cushion the people that are living in the different areas that are food insecure.
The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has donated a surgical truck and 3 caravans valued at over $200,000 to the Ministry of Health to help Zambia achieve its goal of controlling the HIV epidemic. Speaking during the handover in Lusaka, Ministry of Health Permanent Secretary Dr. Kennedy Malama says the donation will enhance the voluntary medical male circumcision VMMC delivery in the country in government's quest to take health services closer to the people. Dr. Malama notes that despite the gains made in reducing the HIV disease burden in the country, the disease remains a public health threat to the socio-economic development and prosperity of the country. He has since thanked the American government for its continued support and partnership in the country's health sector.
Some of you may be aware that the U.S. government, through PEPFAR, has been supporting Zambia since the early 2000s. We are delighted that in the last fiscal year within the PEPFAR calendar, Zambia benefited a total of $385 million as we start what we call COP19. For those of you who may not know, that is the calendar we use in the PEPFAR language. Starting 1st April 2019 to the end of September next year, Zambia is destined to receive a total of $421 million from the U.S. government through PEPFAR support. What we are seeing this morning is part of that broader picture. The US government releases resources to its implementing agencies through PEPFAR, and one of those implementing agencies is CDC.
And U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention Country Director Dr. Simon Agolori says the U.S. government is working closely with the Zambian government to ensure that Zambians have access to high-quality HIV services, including VMMC. Dr. Agolori says the track will allow the Center for Infectious Disease Research in Zambia, CIDES, to provide VMMC services to males who may not be able to get to health facilities. Meanwhile, CIDES Chief Executive Officer Dr. Izukanji Sikazwe has thanked the American government for the donation.
The U.S. government is working closely with the government of Zambia to ensure that Zambians have access to high-quality HIV services, including voluntary medical male circumcision, or VMC. The handover of this cutting-edge surgical track and 3 caravans valued at about $200,000 is a demonstration of the commitment of the U.S. government through the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief to the long-term health of Zambians.
CDC has been supporting us not only by giving us resources to do the various health services in support of the Ministry of Health, but by also providing us with the technical support and guidance in establishing successful programs across the 4 provinces that we have a footprint in. As you will be aware, as you may be aware, CIDES has worked with the Ministry of Health since 2001 with funding from the CDC.
UPND Chairman for Industrial Development, Bernard Mpundu, has described as very scary and uncharacteristic the church's silence on President Edgar Lungu's eating of a roasted snake during his visit to the Special Forces training camp in Imbala. Mr. Mpundu says the country awaits the church's position before the country's Christian values are questioned. He says the nation has in the last 3 days waited for spiritual guidance from the church on the relationship between man and the serpent and what the country's Christian culture stands for. Mr. Mpundu says the serpent has since the days of Aden been associated with the dark world and satanic forces.
In a Christian nation, boasting of being guided by the Christian principles, the nation has in the last 3 days waited for spiritual guidance from the church on what the relationship between man and the serpent is and what our culture as Christians stand for. We understand that the serpent has since the days of Eden been associated with the dark world and satanic forces. This is why we find silence from the church on the matter very scary and uncharacteristic. To Bishop Banda and the entire Board of Christ, the country awaits your response and your position before our Christian values as a nation are questioned and our land is defiled by agents of the underworld. We're a Christian nation. This is enshrined in our Constitution.
Barclays Bank Zambia has invested over 71 million kwacha in technology systems as it transitions process to ABSA reaches an advanced stage. And the bank will next week on Monday launch the first ABSA branch in Lusaka. Speaking at a media briefing in Lusaka, Barclays Bank Zambia Managing Director Mizinga Melu says the bank will this month launch 3 ABSA branches as the transition continues till June 2020. Mrs. Melu has reiterated that there will be no job losses during the transition period.
We have been upgrading, moving our core banking platforms from the UK into South Africa as well as into Zambia. So that has been the first major change. And before we had said, we had talked about a number, we had spent about 46 million kwacha over that, but now that number is way above 70 million kwacha in just the amount we have spent, in this change. I think the second thing is the brand, because Barclays is now a minority shareholder. We cannot continue to use the Barclays brand. So we have now agreed that we're going to use the ABSA brand. You have seen we have been dropping ABSA in the market on our billboards. But what we're doing today is to announce that from Monday, our first ABSA branch will be launched. So Monday will be a historic event, and it was important for you, the key stakeholders, to be aware. As we have been saying, we want to carry our customers along, we want to carry our staff along, and just all our key stakeholders. And really that's what today is all about, to announce that on Monday we'll unveil the first ABSA branch. Now this will be one of many. It will be one of many. We have, we continue to have, about 40 branches. However, the first one and the second.
Speaking at the same briefing, Bank Director for Change Enablement, James Dowie, says more changes are expected in the next few months. And Barclays Bank Zambia Retail Banking Director, Haton Maliki, says customers will continue using the same bank documents, such as ATMs, during the transition period.
We have upgraded our ATMs. We have implemented new ATMs over the last couple of years. Just in the last year, we have replaced 25 of our ATMs to make sure that our customers have the technology that allows them to transact outside of our branch network also. Since the transition from Barclays to ABSA commenced 3 years ago, we have had to make significant changes in the way we operate. But we've also had to make sure that during this transition period that our customers are not affected negatively during this transition.
We remain committed to you, our customers. And as we walk through this journey, which is going to be in stages, it is important to know a few things, and I'll highlight them. Number one, we are changing our branches in stages. During this time, we shall also have a coexistence with our Barclays branches. Your cards, your checkbooks, your forms, which you already have, will continue to be used in both branches. Number two, we will not be asking customers for information to do this process. As James and Nzinga has highlighted, we have ensured and will continue to ensure minimum customer impact.
EcoBank Zambia has reaffirmed its commitment towards supporting the Farmer Input and Support Program FISIP. Bank Managing Director Kola Adeleke says the bank has since made a commitment to the tune of $50 million United States dollars. Mr. Adeleke says the bank is supporting the FISIP program this year. Meanwhile, Mr. Adeleke says the bank has so far performed well in 2019 and is hovering around 300 billion kwacha in assets.
This year so far we've been good. For your information, this is the 10th year. We are marking the 10th year anniversary of EcoBank in Zambia. And for us, we are exceeding all our expectations. At least the commitment that we have given to our shareholders. As of today, we still have fully capitalized over 55 million kwacha as the bank's shareholders' funds. We are hovering around 3 billion kwacha in terms of assets, which is really very good for us. Looking at our age, we are now the 9th biggest bank in the country. I think we haven't done badly. I think we are okay. Well, it's a bit difficult to say that now, but I will just say that we are one of the banks that are supporting in the FISIP program. And we have made a commitment to the tune of about $50 million, and we are working with the relevant authorities within the ministries to make sure that this is adequately done. So we are one of the banks that are supporting the FISIP program for this year. So we are looking at about $50 million.
To end the news, we recap on stories making headlines. Zambia and the Democratic Republic of Congo have signed an MOU for the export of 600,000 metric tons of maize and milling to that country. Finance Minister Wada Ngandu says government is in the process of finding an equity partner to operate nitrogen chemicals of Zambia. And government has disputed reports suggesting that 5 people have died of starvation in Shangombo district in Western Province as a result of hunger in the area. On that note, we end the news. Pleasant viewing.